Hello and welcome back to our 7th episode in the Brand Bewitchery series as I take you through each chapter of my guidebook to help you wield the story cycle system to craft spellbinding stories for your brand. Hi, I'm Park Howell, host of the Business of Story, and today you will learn how to use your 9 one-word brand descriptors as themes for true stories you tell to your audience on their 3-phase journey from brand awareness to brand adoption through brand appreciation. So settle in and listen to how you can put brand storytelling to work for you right now on this special edition of the Business of Story. But first, if you are planning your annual sales retreat, revenue kickoff event, or sales enablement training, then please consider me as your trainer or keynote speaker. I work with iconic brands in lots of industries, including retail, like the Home Depot internal sales team, Walmart Canada's Learning and Development Group, and Lixil's sales and marketing team. Tech is another big industry I coach our storytelling techniques in, including the likes of Dell, Intel, Canada's Ace Tech Conference, and Checker background check platform out of San Francisco. Healthcare also relies on business of story training for its administrators, doctors, and medical device manufacturers, including, Banner Health, Medela, Motif, and the Mayo Clinic. Work with associations include the National Association of Music Merchants International Conference, the National Hop Growers Association, and Professionals for Association Revenue. And of course, I work with small businesses too, especially with my twice-yearly training for the Better Business Bureau Southwest executives and its membership. I know I can help you and your people excel through the stories you tell, especially if you are any of the following. Are you a driven business leader who must have your messages land right the first time, every time, to motivate and move your people to action? Are you an effective learning and development professional who wants to elevate the communication skills of your people by creating a common storytelling language throughout your enterprise? Maybe you're an ambitious middle manager who wants to accelerate success by connecting more deeply with your colleagues and your customers. Perhaps you're a top sales executive who needs greater focus in your presentations to convince and convert prospects quickly. Are you a creative marketing professional who wants to hack through the noise and hook the hearts of your audiences? Maybe you're a dynamic sales enablement director who must bridge the gap between marketing hyperbole and the effective stories your sales team actually need to tell. Are you gigging as an influential content marketer who hopes to 10x your online engagement? Maybe a caring human resource director who wants to advance your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives by sharing your people's stories. Perhaps you're an inspiring business coach or consultant who wants to make a bigger impact with your clients. A captivating speaker who must win over an audience with every single keynote. Maybe you find yourself as an eager job seeker who requires a more compelling cover letter and impactful interview techniques. Perhaps you're an achieving college student who seeks higher grades on your papers while preparing for your job search communications. Finally, you might just be a promising high schooler or the parent of one who wished you had learned about the ABT in the 3rd grade, like me, because your term papers are now earning A's every time. If you are any of these or all of these, please reach out to me at park@businessofstory.com or come on through our contact page at businessofstory.com. I would love to help you and your people excel through the stories you tell. Now settle in as I take you through Chapter 7 of Brand Bewitchery, all about the journey. This is where you learn how to capture your stories in the wild that are guided by your 9 one-word brand descriptors you developed from Chapter 6, and when you use those stories during your customer's journey, starting with brand awareness to brand adoption through brand appreciation. After all great storytelling is scalable. And isn't that what you are all about? Trying to scale your business for greater impact with your customers, with your colleagues, and with the communities you serve. Let's do it. Chapter 7, Journey. How to increase customer engagement through the stories you tell. Quote, stories have a way of summoning forces. End quote. Christopher Vogler, The Writer's Journey. How to make your story their story. In October 2015, I was riding in a cab from SeaTac Airport to my folks' home in Woodinville, Washington. We drove through hallways of glistening cedar and Douglas fir trees, dripping in a cool autumn drizzle. The taxi driver spoke in a thick Greek accent, with bulbous syllables folding into English like a baker kneading a baklava. Messy, but sweet. He asked what I did. I'm in the storytelling business, I said. Ooh, you tell stories for living, he asked. Not quite. I teach business leaders how to become more effective communicators by using storytelling. Ah, very good. He cocked his head toward the rear view mirror, his dark eyes fixing on me in the back seat, as if the cab would drive itself. Do you know what all stories begin with? He queried, bushy eyebrows rising. No, what? Empathy, he emphasized, squinting a knowing smile. He looked back to the road. Finally. Why empathy? Because how two people share same world and story if not connected through empathy. It's same everywhere, he shrugged with a nonchalant wisdom. This is a moment that I will not forget, seemingly inconsequential but profound. I found, as Christopher Vogler wrote in The Writer's Journey, that the act of telling a story summons forces. I've also learned that when you study storytelling, the universe delivers these little wisdom bombs in the most peculiar circumstances through unsuspecting messengers. Vogler, true to Campbell's hero's journey, calls these characters threshold guardians because they are the gatekeepers to new worlds of knowledge and experience where wisdom resides. Some threshold guardians try to block your progress, such as the threshold guardians of doubt we introduce in Chapter 3, while others act as wise sentries to prepare you for the journey ahead. What if you and your people can be persuasive threshold guardians for your customers by sharing intentional stories about your brand that reveal the wisdom of your offering? That's what this chapter is all about. Building understanding, empathy, and connection with your audiences through your true stories, well told, that will usher them into a new world. First, we will explore how you find the stories that support the 9 one-word descriptors you identified in Chapter 6. These anecdotes will become powerful brand content. By having your people find their own versions of these stories, you will build an immense library of content marketing. And with your stories in hand, you will plan when to share them during the 3 phases of your customer journey: brand awareness, brand adoption, and brand appreciation. When you and your team start finding the stories that support your brand story strategy, you will witness how your brand story is alive and well within your organization, proving that you're headed in the right direction with your narrative strategy. Build a storytelling culture as your team sees these true stories materialize all around them. Co-create your branding campaign as you use these stories to get your people to buy in and align with your focused mission while you build real-world content for inbound and outbound marketing and sales. Connect your stories with your customers and where they are on their brand journey from brand awareness to adoption to appreciation. And encourage all your people to find their own personal 9 stories that they've experienced with your brand. And before you know it, you will have hundreds of tales to choose from in a story library that is uniquely your own. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to share with you the 9 one-word descriptors we developed for the business of story. And I'll give you an example of each in play. I have dozens of these stories. But before we get started, this is a great spot to expand on something I briefly mentioned in the previous chapter, namely the elements of a small story which can create a big impact. I learned this structure from my friends Sean Callahan and Mark Schenk, who are from the international business storytelling consultancy Anecdote in Melbourne, Australia. I'm a certified coach with Anecdote's Storytelling for Leaders training program. They help me understand how to break down the structure of a brand-supporting anecdote by using these 5 primal story elements. When. Provide a specific timestamp for when the story you are about to tell occurs. A precise time alerts your audience's subconscious limbic system that it's about to be presented with an experience that it should pay attention to, so it will know what to do in case it ever happens to them. Think of your brain as your system's hard drive and your stories as its software. A timestamp provides the go command to start sifting meaning out of the coming tale. Where? What is the exact location where this moment happened? Callahan coaches that you can use either a timestamp or a location stamp to capture the attention of your audience, but I like to double down and use both whenever possible to prime my audience for the story. Character. Who is the central character in your story? Is it you, a colleague, a customer, or someone else? The most important thing about the singular character in your story is that your audience must be able to empathize with him or her, so they will live vicariously through the tale and embrace the learning moment the tale conjures. Action/surprise. Something has to happen in your story to make it a story. Think of the first 3 primal elements as the setup of your story, the and in the ABT, as discussed in Chapter 4, to set the context, but then describe in quick detail the surprising outcome that reveals a truth. The final element of the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact is the aha moment. The universal truth of the story supports the business point you are making with this short story. Audiences can and will argue against data, stats, charts, and graphs, but they can find it difficult to refute a true story well told. In fact, anecdotes invite your audiences into your view of the world through the moments you experience. These are the scenes that support your larger brand narrative. See if you can find these 5 primal elements in the stories I share about Business of Stories' 9 one-word brand descriptors. As demonstrated in the previous chapter, I've grouped these 9 anecdotes into the 3 categories of organization, offering, and outcomes from the OO story exercise. Organization, mage, industrious, optimistic. Offering, primal, dynamic, truth. Outcomes, clarity, connection, trust. So let's begin with 3 anecdotes that fall under the first 3 words that describe the organization of the Business of Story. Again, that's mage, industrious, optimistic. The Business of Story is a mage. I've learned that to benefit from the full force of storytelling, you have to understand the applied science and bewitchery of the craft. Russell Goldstein, CFP, CAP, is an institutional client advisor at U.S. Trust, Bank of America, and a graduate of my storytelling course in the Executive Masters of Sustainability Leadership program at Arizona State University. In 2017, he started my 12-month program, thinking storytelling in business, was a joke, a gimmick. But once he got educated on how to be an intentional storyteller using proven narrative frameworks, his whole world changed. He sent me this note following the course. Park, a couple of weeks ago, I presented to about 80 people at the monthly meeting for the planned Giving Roundtable. They sent me the audience reviews from SurveyMonkey. Look at what they said. Quote, engaging, motivating, and energetic, end quote. Quote, Russ is a great storyteller, end quote. Quote, enjoyed the fact that there were personal stories interspersed with the relevant topic, end quote. Quote, Russell is a wonderful presenter and a true professional, end quote. Park, I never realized the power of story in business until I took your class. Now I'm trying to teach my colleagues how to use stories too. Thank you. Storytelling is like having a big old bonus check sitting in my top drawer. Thank you. Signed, Russell. You see how Russell applied the science of storytelling to bewitch his audiences? After all, you have to understand the magic if you're going to cast the spell. That's why mage is our first one-word brand descriptor under the category of organization. The business of story is about being industrious. The business of story approach is both the product of an industrious assemblage of proven narrative frameworks and the platform by which humans can become more effective communicators in our overcommunicated, tech-driven world. Let's use an example that I presented in the preface, just in case you skipped that part in your eagerness to get your story straight. In his 2012 predictions for the tech industry, pundit Mark Anderson, CEO of Strategic News Service, said, quote, "Steve Jobs didn't really invent anything at all, but he was great at integrating things into a product," end quote. He argued that most of the technology that created the Mac, iPod, Nextcube, etc. was already available. Jobs was simply able to see things others couldn't in combining disparate technology advancements to create new products. Apple's innovation was not so much a product of invention, but observation and integration. I found that the same concept of invention via integration to work in business communications too, specifically with brand storytelling. In 2006, after running my ad agency for over a decade, I realized that the advertising paradigm, as I knew it, no longer worked. While brands used to own the influence of mass media, broadcast, print, outdoor, technology turned their world upside down. The internet handed control of communication to the consumer. The masses became the media. And by the way, they now own your brand story too. Desperate to find an answer for how to get our clients' messages to cut through the noise, I first turned to Hollywood. There I learned about Joseph Campbell and the universal framework he called the hero's journey. Then I saw how screenwriters like Christopher Vogler, Blake Snyder, and Randy Olson use various forms of the hero's journey and other narrative structures to capture their audience's attention. These same narrative forms began to materialize around me in marketing and sales, especially in the work of Dr. Robert Cialdini, author of Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. I noticed that all the most powerful campaigns from the likes of Apple, Nike, Virgin, Airbnb, and others were all story-based and used these same templates, whether they intended to or not. Finally, I dove into the neurophysiology work and studies of folks like Dr. Daniel Kahneman, Dr. Paul Zak, and American moral psychologist Jonathan Haidt to understand the intersection of brain structure and story structure. When people ask me how the proven story cycle system came about, I say, quote, "The story cycle system is distilled from the timeless narrative structure of the ancients, inspired by the story artists of Hollywood, influenced by masters of persuasion, guided by trend spotters, and informed by how the human mind grapples for meaning," end quote. This is the foundation for the industriousness of the business of story platform. The business of story is about creating optimism. You know storytelling is powerful when you see how people get inspired when they learn to craft, tell, and appreciate a good story. They naturally become more optimistic about having an impact in the world they seek. On Sunday, July 29th, 2018, I was working with 110 Air Force generals and their staff at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, during a half-day Business of Story workshop. When I asked some of the attendees to share the stories they were working on, Brigadier General Christopher Mookie Walker raised his hand. He said that he would be speaking to the West Virginia State football team on the following Sunday. He told me he typically just gets up and wings it because he is good on his feet and a confident speaker. But now that he had been introduced to the and, but, therefore foundation to storytelling and the story cycle system, he completely changed the approach to his presentation right there in the workshop. He realized he needed a more focused narrative to connect with the football players. His message was that he himself had been a reluctant hero, ignoring the universe's call to him until he spent several years in the Air Force. He learned that we all have the capability to be effective leaders. His point to the players was that when they stepped onto the football field, they became leaders in the eyes of the West Virginia State football fans, especially the kids, and that it is their duty to act like leaders, especially during those times when they didn't feel like it. General Walker stressed that their leadership was important because West Virginia has the highest rate of opioid addiction in the country, and that these players could play a major role in turning that around by taking a stand against drugs and working with youth to encourage them to make the right choices. General Walker got a huge ovation from his fellow generals when he had finished describing the theme and approach to his upcoming presentation. He said it was inspired by the work we were doing in this Business of Story Communications workshop. Become an intentional storyteller, and your leadership will inspire optimism in your audiences. For more ways to create your own inspiring stories, download our fun and free ebook with 5 storytelling exercises. It's called The 5 Stages of Grief in Telling Your Business Story at businessofstory.com/storytelling-tools. Now let's move to our second category of stories about your product or service. This is called offering. The business of story is primal. The various narrative frameworks you can use to tell a story have a rich, proven history of deeply connecting with people and moving them to action. In fact, they're primal to us storytelling monkeys. In the fall of 2018, I was working with 60 engineers and executives at the Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station in Phoenix, Arizona. They were a smart and very logic-driven crowd, so I shared with them how our minds are hardwired for story by telling them the tale of Thog the caveman. One evening, Thog returned to his cave looking a little worse for wear. His plump cavern roommate Larry grunted, "Thog, you no look so good. What happened?" He explained, "Thog go down to stream to catch saber-toothed salmon for dinner." "Uh-huh," grunted Larry. "But saber-toothed tiger show up." "Uh-oh," belched his roommate. "Thog gave tiger salmon. Tiger likes salmon better than Thog, so here I am safe in cave with you." "Aha," said Larry, nodding at the insight. And there you have it, a perfect 3-act story structure delineated by Larry's uh-huh setup, uh-oh conflict, and aha resolution. Thog's story is a fun way to illustrate the 3-act structure of every compelling story. Plus, it underscores that storytelling is more important to our survival than our opposable thumbs. After all, stories are what helped us navigate and survive the savannah 90,000 years ago, and what helped us evolve from cavemen to consumers. Remember that this is essentially the same story structure you used in Chapter 4 to suss out your unique value proposition in the form of the and, but, and therefore foundational narrative framework. You can learn more about the and, but, and therefore framework by listening to my podcast with Dr. Randy Olson called The Science of Storytelling. The business of story is dynamic. The dynamism of storytelling through the use of metaphor is precisely how you become a more persuasive communicator, because stories can link 2 disparate worlds into a third, more powerful collective point of view. For instance, in late March 2018, I was greeted by 100-plus skeptical software developers at the Muricon conference in Sacramento, California. I kicked off my Business of Story keynote by asking the audience this question: who thinks storytelling is bullshit? I was not surprised when half the programmers in the room raised their hands. But instead of ducking their skepticism, I acknowledged it. I said that I didn't understand their life of coding, but I felt like our 2 worlds were not so dissimilar. We agreed that great developers seek to design and write the cleanest, purest code in order to create the best user experience. I mentioned that storytellers do the same thing. We want to craft and tell clear and compelling stories to create optimal user experiences between the teller and their audience. In fact, I said, stories are simply the software that drives the hardware of our minds, which are constantly whirring as they make meaning out of the madness of being human. They laughed, nodded in agreement, and gave me permission to teach them how to write better code for storytelling over the next 90 minutes. Storytelling is one of the most powerful tools for overcoming entrenched anti-story viewpoints. And the only way you are going to overcome these polarized views is with the dynamism of a better story and the positive energy and force it creates. You can read more about this by pulling up the resources on our website at the end of this chapter. Read how storytelling soft skills can create better user experiences in technical careers. The business of story is about truth. A true story, well told, reveals a truth about ourselves and the world around us. Per Olaf Bengtsson was bobbing in his boat at the mouth of a precarious channel in the Galapagos Islands. He was only 22 years old, standing by himself in the stern of his 24-foot sailboat on his solo journey from Stockholm, Sweden to Melbourne, Australia. It was getting dark, and in 1982, he didn't have a GPS, so he decided to anchor in a small bay and wait for the safety of morning light to navigate the passage. Quote, "Have you ever heard the weird screech dolphins make in the wild?" End quote. He asked me with the accent of a salty, seagoing Swede. "I can't say that I have," I answered. Well, I woke up about 5 in the morning and a dozen dolphins were scurrying around my boat, screeching that eerie sound at me. I climbed up on deck to see about the commotion and realized that the tide had gone out, way out. I had just minutes before we'd be crushed upon the volcanic rock, he said. "We?" I asked. "Well, me and my boat," Per replied. "I had to pull anchor and get out of there immediately." "Whoa, did you think the dolphins were warning you?" I asked. "Yes, I think they knew I was in trouble and they wanted to wake me." Just then, a sudden smile of recognition washed across his face. "What?" I asked. "I've spent my career as a car wash salesman, and I just realized that every big sale I've ever made in all my life came after telling a sailing story." "Why do you think that is?" I prodded. He shrugged. "I don't know." "Because," I suggested, "stories like the one you just told reveal a truth about you, your character, and the universe around us. Truth and trust are at the core of every relationship, right? Your story tells of your courage and persistence. Isn't that exactly what I want in my car wash salesman? Because I know, like those dolphins, you'll be there for me when I need you most." At the core of every story is truth. The third category of stories inspired from your 9 one-word descriptors comes under the category of outcomes. The business of story is about revealing clarity. When you clarify your story using the business of story tools and techniques, you will reveal insights that are invaluable to furthering your personal and professional ambitions. On Thursday, February 24th, 2018, I was presenting a 90-minute Business of Story workshop to 400 professionals during Social Media Marketing World at the San Diego Convention Center. Entrepreneur Saul Neer stepped to the microphone to share his "and button therefore" statement with the audience, which would be the foundation for his personal brand story. He stood tall, but as he read, his posture changed. His head dropped. He became confused. His ABT statement about becoming a coach for entrepreneurs wasn't clear or convincing. So I pressed him to see if he could clarify, but he couldn't. I asked him if coaching entrepreneurs was truly where his heart was right now. He shrugged and said, "I don't know. Thank you." And then he sat down. The next day, I received this pivotal tweet. At Park Howell. "Hi, I was at your session at #SMMW18. I got a lot out of it. I asked a question and you guided me to clarify my purpose. Next day, I realized my heart isn't coaching entrepreneurs right now. Instead, I'm going to do a goofy YouTube channel and just have fun. Thank you!" Exclamation mark. I believe Saul is now following a more powerful story for himself through the insight he gained in this simple story exercise. The power of clarifying your story. The business of story is about connection. Intentional storytelling connects you with yourself and your audiences on a deep, primal level. In early June 2018, Jennifer Russo called me to discuss some job opportunities. She had spent 15 years as an international marketing communications executive for Rio Tinto Mining, but now she was leaving her position to spend more time with her two young boys. As a single mom, she still needed a full-time job, but one involving less travel. When I asked her what kind of position she was looking for, she mentioned a high-level job where she could work with a multinational company and use her communication skills right there in Phoenix. And maybe something in diversity and inclusion, she said. You have an amazing background, I said, but I think your job search criteria are too vague. I could tell a bit of coaching was in order, so I encouraged her to clarify her personal brand story to amplify her impact and actually simplify her life. Because you don't want to spend the next 15 years, the prime of your business life, in another job that doesn't play to your curiosity and passion, I said. As her brand marketing agency of record for 5 years, I experienced the energy and positive attitude Jennifer brought to all of her work relationships. She was too close to her own attributes to really appreciate them. So I suggested that she excavate her personal brand story by filling out the DIY Brand Story Strategy Workbook. When she was finished, Jennifer sent it to me so I could help her refine her story. Clarifying her story was important to define the position she was looking for, which would attract the right opportunities and save her time from chasing the wrong gigs. I suggested that her unique personal brand position in the market of corporate communications professionals is as the, quote, kinetic communicator, end quote, with an energy that attracts professionals of diverse thinking and backgrounds to help people and organizations outperform in the market. Jennifer mines the untapped capital in a company's collective diversity. Her personal brand story now connects her to her authentic offering as the kinetic communicator, and it has helped connect her with the right kinds of job opportunities to help companies connect with their people through diversity and inclusion. As of this writing, Jennifer is Director of Corporate Communications for Banner Health, and she loves her position and is making a difference. You can experience Jennifer's story at jenniferrusso.me. The business of story is about trust. The only way to truly live into your most powerful stories is to have the courage to share the truth that creates the trust, especially if that truth makes you feel vulnerable. In March 2018, I met Angela Crow, a soft-spoken 30-something Ukrainian immigrant. She works for Silverline, a fast-growing high-tech customer relationship management firm in New York. I was doing a Business of Story workshop with 50 of their top sales and marketing people when Angela volunteered to tell her story. She said that her sole purpose at the company was to build important alliances and partnerships within the organization and its customers. That was all fine and dandy, but I pressed her to recall the specific moment when she knew this was her superpower. But she pushed back, perhaps because we were working her story in front of her colleagues, or maybe it was just too painful a moment to share in public. After the session, she came up to me and said, "I didn't tell you everything." "I know. How come?" I asked. "Well, I've been told that business people don't think it is appropriate to talk about my hard times in the orphanage." "Orphanage? Wait a sec. You grew up in a Ukrainian orphanage?" I asked. "Yes, since birth until I was 18. It was hard. People picked on me and abused me. So I don't talk about it. I'm told no one wants to hear it." "How'd you cope?" I asked. She recalled the moment when she realized that she had to surround herself with kids she could trust and with adults who didn't just care for her, but cared about her. Angela built groups of these people to help her rise above the harsh conditions of her environment. "Oh my God, no wonder you excel at building alliances and partnerships," I said. "You grew up doing it to survive." I encouraged Angela to talk about her life in the orphanage without going into all the difficult details. I mean, come on, Ukrainian orphanage. That story tells itself. She nodded in agreement. I learned that Angela moved to the States when she was 18, earned 2 degrees from the University of Georgia, and then a master's in international business from Georgia State, and has had a successful career in technology. I told her, have the courage to tell your story because you are the epitome of the American dream. Never let anyone quiet that. And here's how you use it. Just imagine looking into the eyes of your next prospective client and asking them, when was the last time your vendor orphaned you? Didn't do what they said they'd do, left you feeling abandoned. I promise you, that will never happen with me. She smiled and seemed relieved. When I asked her if I could retell her story during my TEDx Gilbert talk, she said, absolutely. Angela's story is an excerpt from my TED Talk. Start looking for your scenes, and your story will find you. Your brand engagement stories. Now it's time for you and your team to find 9 stories, one for each of the brand descriptors you identified in the previous chapter. Use one of your words, as I have above, as the singular theme and start capturing those stories in the wild using the 5 primal elements of story. Once you have begun capturing your anecdotes, categorize them in 3 groups. Some of the stories may be used in more than one category. Those categories are brand awareness, brand adoption, and brand appreciation. This is where you will share those stories. When and where do your audiences become aware of your brand? What is their first contact, and which stories do you have in the queue to pique their interest? Think back to what your customers wish and want for themselves, and then determine the stories that will help them find the will to go for it with your product or service. I heard a definition recently that I liked about the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is liking someone and being concerned for their plight in life. Empathy is that feeling you get when someone is like you. You can empathize with them because you've experienced something similar to what they have experienced. You want to demonstrate your empathy to your audiences so that they feel, hey, he or she is just like me. That's why you tell your stories from your audience's perspective. Give them a character they can live vicariously through. Help them realize that you understand what they wish for and want because you are sharing stories about individuals that they can root for. This is how you connect their world with your world. As you unearth your stories based on each of your 9 brand descriptors, you and your team will be amazed at how your overall brand story comes to life, how you are already walking the talk. And in the process, you'll notice that you're building your innate storytelling muscles to grow your organization and your people. You will feel yourself becoming more of a messaging mage as you deploy the primal frameworks of story to clarify your collective journey. When you become industrious about viewing the entirety of your business strategy, team alignment, and customer acquisition through a narrative lens, you will see how dynamic your interpersonal connections become through storytelling. Optimism increases when you help your audiences envision a shared reality that they can buy into and prosper from. And this only happens by sharing true stories, good news or bad, that build the ultimate test of a brand: trust. Now here's a quick test for you. Can you find the 9 one-word descriptors of the business of story in the paragraph above? I use them to not only help me find my stories that began this chapter, but as narrative buoys to navigate my story in a sea of noise. How am I different? How do I impact the lives of others? How do I transport leaders of purpose-driven brands, their people, and the communities they serve to new worlds? Did I capture that overarching narrative in one paragraph using my descriptors? Well, you be the judge. Now it's your turn. I have 2 exercises for you. First, pull together your 9 one-word descriptors and ask each of your team members to select 3 of the words and find 3 true stories, 1 story per descriptor, to share with everyone. You are now proofing your brand story strategy by seeing it in action through the stories they select. Plus, you are starting to build your story library to use in all your internal and external communications. Next, map the customer journeys for each of the 3 primary audiences you identified in Chapter 2. Their journey includes brand awareness, brand adoption, and brand appreciation. Once you determine when and where they come in contact with your brand, decide to purchase your product or service, and then return for more, you'll have a new supply of anecdotes to add to your growing story library. The more stories, the merrier. Final thoughts. You are now squarely in the action portion of Act 2 of the Story Cycle system, as your brand narrative has taken flight through the stories you are capturing in the wild. Campbell calls this the test and trials of the hero's journey. While you set the context for your brand story and humanize the personality of your offering, you've now truly brought it to life through the true stories you make happen in people's lives. Next up is to map the victory milestones along your customer's journey of brand awareness, adoption, and appreciation to demonstrate to your audiences that they are on the right path with you. Additional resources. Visit businessofstory.com/journey to explore more ways to express your brand's unique personality as you read Volume 7 of the Business of Story online magazine, The Road of Trials, Mapping Your Customer's Journey. Listen to Greg Chapman on how to combine the science of data with the art of storytelling to create meaningful customer experiences. And watch my quick explanation video on how to map your customer journey at bit.ly/storycycle-journey. And now, your story on activity. Pick a favorite story that supports one of your descriptors and outline it using the 5 primal elements of story. Then tell it 3 times to 3 different people: a close family member or friend, a colleague, and a stranger. See how it evolves with each telling, because as Christopher Vogler wrote in The Writer's Journey, stories have a way of summoning forces. See how your stories conjure the energy of your brand offering to help all who come in contact with it grow. Thanks for listening. I hope you're enjoying my Brand Bewitchery book and this series to help you craft spellbinding stories for your brand using, of course, the Story Cycle system. Please share this episode and join us next week when we will travel through Chapter 8 called Victory, on how to celebrate the wins on your customer's journey from brand awareness to brand adoption through brand appreciation. The theme music is composed by Darius Holbert, marketing by Marissa Hill, and the show is expertly edited by Caden Howell. If I can help you and your team excel through the stories you tell, hit our contact page at businessofstory.com for information on my in-person, virtual, and hybrid mastery courses, my keynotes, and I even have a do-it-yourself storytelling training just for you. And as you grow as a more confident and persuasive communicator, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.